Good evening and welcome to Between the Lanes, episode number 138. I'm Ron.
I'm Shane.
And tonight's episode, we are going to talk about some history, some body mounting tips, motors, and more. So, again, welcome to Between the Lanes, episode number 138. You can find us on, as soon as this flips over, ta-da, YouTube, home of Between the Lanes. Slot Racers, the channel, 138 episodes are up there now. Some special episodes and some how-to videos on Facebook. Oh, that skipped Facebook. Oh, geez, it's skipping everything.
Bag it up.
Oh, well, anyway, find us on Facebook. Between the Lanes is the page. Normally, this is the time of the show for race results, and we don't have any because of the shutdowns nationwide. There are no races going on. I shouldn't say no races, but no bigger series type races. So, and if people are racing, they're kind of keeping it on the down low, and that's okay too. So, we'll start off with some history. So, like I was telling Shane prior to the show here, on Facebook, on one of the older vintage type Facebook pages, vintage slot car pages, there's a gentleman, I should probably wrote his name down, but he will once a week or twice a week post up entire episodes of magazines from the 60s, and they're kind of cool to look at and check out the technical articles and some of the ads and, you know, just things that were going on back in the day. So he had posted up I think it was the April issue. No, it wasn't the April issue. It was July issue of Model Car Science, 1964. And there was an article or spotlight on the track of the month, and it was a place called Hobby Crafters in Pinellas Park, Florida, home of Fast Eddie's currently.
Been there.
Okay, so they had some homemade tracks. Yeah, okay, so they had some homemade tracks and stuff, and this picture here is like a 4-lane, real twisty, kind of like, I don't know, it'd be like a racetrack on the side of a mountain or something. Not a hill climb, but not a flat track, but all the turns are flat. So just kind of a cool little club track. And they had another little track in there too. And so I guess the reason I put this on the show was as a challenge to our Florida racers. So this raceway was located at 5735 Park Boulevard. And I'm just curious if that building would still exist, what it looks like today. So maybe one of our Florida guys that's close to 5735 Park Avenue, Pinellas Park, Florida, maybe they can go over there and snap a photo and send it in of this former location of this raceway from 1964. So that, you know, that's 56 years ago. So
Right.
it'd just be cool, you know, so because on past shows we've shown buildings of old raceways, what they look like today. Some have changed, some haven't changed. Some are gone, some were flattened and new buildings built on the property, but just be cool to see what it looks like, the property looks like today. So Florida racers, you have some homework. So also, okay, so many episodes back, I can't give you the episode numbers. Ralph and I kind of did a 2-episode deal about American raceways and other tracks that were made, commercial tracks that were made back in the day by companies. And Miniature Grand Prix Raceways was one of the companies that was around back then. And there's always been controversy, if you will, that American Raceways, which was the most popular of all the commercial built tracks back then, that American Raceways sold franchises for American Raceways, or basically they're Tom Thumb centers. But there's never been any proof of American Raceways offering franchises or franchise opportunities or turnkey operations, nothing from American Raceways. It's like this myth because it's never been proven. And, you know, if someone has something in paperwork from American or an ad or, you know, any kind of like something official from them that they were selling franchises, I'd love to see it, and I would have to stand corrected. But I have never seen anything in writing from American Raceways. So Miniature Grand Prix Racing Centers was started by a company called J. Warren Hull and Associates. They were in California. J. Warren Hull started operations in 1947, and they were business consultants. And according to the next thing I show you here in the article, it said that they had opened several nationally known franchises in previous type businesses. And I did some Google searching and I couldn't find anything related to them, period. So I couldn't even tell you what nationally known franchises they were involved with. Okay. So, so anyway, so they were offering slot car raceway franchises, like not that they supplied the location, but they would you would find a location, you would order your tracks, they would come in, set them up, get you going, and then give you the keys. And so basically they started research and development about raceway franchises in the fall of 1963. And then by April of 64, they opened their first franchise raceway. And so first franchise opened April of 64. By September of 1964, they had opened 6 franchises, and they were all in California at that time. And they advertised in the magazines every month that you could talk to them about franchise opportunities. And in May or June of 1964, so a month or so after they opened their first franchise, they started the Model Car Racing Association, and they came out with a set of rules. And I'm assuming, you know, they really couldn't make rules for cars until they actually opened a raceway and probably had a few races and to sort out classes and rules and things like that. So American Raceway in 1965, they started the American Model Car Racing Congress. So in a way, American followed suit on what Miniature Grand Prix was doing, but they both had them. So basically, I sum this up. Grand Prix was the only franchise, or only offered franchise, if you will, that I know of from the 60s. And maybe some people get this confused with American because, you know, people are like, yeah, they sold franchises, you know, and it's like, yeah, well, this company sold them, but it wasn't American. So I just thought it was kind of cool and interesting, and clears the air a little bit. I don't have any of the like old magazines. Like, I wish I had them all, but in order that's a lot of searching and chasing and to get everyone. So I just never really pursued that. But maybe someday I'll find a collection and buy it, and then I'll have them all. But yeah, this guy posts up this stuff, and you see all kinds of cool stuff from time to time. So stuff you forgot about, stuff you didn't know about, and this was kind of one of them. But this kind of helped me to prove that, yes, there was company, or at least one company was selling franchise opportunities for raceways, and it was an American Model Car Raceways. So last Friday, we had to me, it was a kind of a big loss to the slot car community, and that was the passing of Jim Hahn. And when I was notified about it, it was just like a huge shock. And Jim and I, we go back to like 1991. I met him at a race, and shortly after that, he started doing my armature balancing, and that continued up until the late 90s. Jim was also the USRA National Tech Director during my time as National Director from like 1990, I guess 93, 94, 95. Jim was a great guy. He was good people. I could never say anything bad about Jim. I mean, me and Jim would have discussions and arguments, and we always agreed to disagree, but he was a good guy, had a great heart. He did a great service for many racers with his balancing. I mean, he's the guy that, in my opinion, in the early 90s and through the 80s, he was the guy that showed the serious racers what good balancing was. And then he set the standard. He raised the bar. So everybody that got into the balancing business after that, they had to up their game, or at least offer balancing as good as Jim did. But Jim went so much further. Jim could balance gears for you. He could balance tires for you. He did the speed spurs. He did custom motor building, custom motor work. He did so many things. I mean, he grind armature shafts and stuff that most of the other guys didn't want to do. But he was kind of a one-stop shop for that. So he wasn't the only guy that did it. I mean, you could send your arms out, to this place and get your shafts ground and get your setup or whatever built here. But I mean, he could do everything, and he offered everything. And he helped a lot of racers go fast and get fast. And so, it was a great loss to the industry, but personally it was kind of a big loss too, because, Jim, like I said, Jim was a great guy. So, and Shane had some experience with Jim too. And we talked about it last week after he passed away, and, it was just, it's just a sad situation.
With me, when I got the message, I was like, huh?
Yeah. Like I said, I was shocked.
It was one of those things, like, I didn't believe it, where I had to go check, and I'm like,
right.
He messaged me. I was like, I just talked to him 4 days ago.
Right.
Right. I was like, he was getting my address because he actually did some armature work for me, and I was just like, wow.
Right. Yep. So, rest in peace, Jim. We're gonna miss you, and thanks for all the good times and fun and all the education and stuff that you left behind. So 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was 3 weeks ago, we had a giveaway for the Quick Time Tire Prep package. And that package, I don't know why this is doing this. Okay, so that package consisted of the QT Wintergreen, the QT2 Grape. So the Wintergreen is a tire conditioner and softener. QT Grape is a deep conditioning treatment that will provide added bite to your tires without softening them. The QT3 Blueberry is designed to be an alternative prep to our Wintergreen. It will soften your tires as well as add bite. The Orange Candy, which is QT4, is designed as a foundation. It's a conditioner that will add bite to your tires without softening them drastically. And it says it's like made for hot summer days on both indoor and outdoor tracks, which is an RC thing. It works on both foam and rubber tires. Says that the idea behind this foundation is for the application process to start at home so that you can build the bite level desired and save time at the racetrack. Then there's the QT Tire Wash, which is made to clean the outside surfaces of your tire and remove dirt and grime off of and out of your tire. And then there's 2 bottles of QuickTime Lightweight Fully Synthetic Oil. Both bottles are the same, except one is Cherry Bomb Red and the other is Pina Colada Blue. And I think they're scented, like they have a scent to them. So they're both the same. So anyway, we had a drawing for this 3 weeks ago. We gave a time limit on it to be claimed. It was not claimed in time. So we are going to give this away again. And it's April 15th, and you will have until April 29th to claim this. And you will have to contact me, Ron Hirschman, and I will mail the package of these goodies to you once I have your address and once you claim this. So do we want to give this away now, or do we want to give it away later?
Let's go for it.
Let's go for it, says Shane.
Roll the beautiful bean footage.
All right. So the winner of the QT products. I don't know what to call
we
this
have
stuff.
Frank's name in there because Frank keeps
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
his name in there.
yeah. Tire prep package. And the winner is, when I say tire prep package, I can't really say it because I don't want you to put the oil on your tires. Okay, I think I have one. I have one. So the winner is, oh, I know he'll claim this because he watches the show, Phil Kruder from South Bend, Indiana. So Phil, send me your address and I will send you this this package of tire juice goodies, I'll call it, along with some synthetic oil.
Not suitable for drinking.
Not suitable for drinking. And there you have it. I'm sure it'll be claimed. All right. So it was asked, well, there was a discussion on Slot Car Race Talk on Facebook about body mounting. And I think the question was, how do you get your body height correct at the rear of the body when you're mounting your body? Okay, so some people would give some suggestions, and I don't know if it was you or someone else said something about that's the topic for on Between the Lanes or something, and there's a video, one of the how-to videos kind of covers this. But since I did that video, I actually found a better way to do the rear body height. And I've been using it for the last month or two, and I can't believe that I didn't figure this out many, many years ago. So so what I've got pictured is a Ralph Thorne Racing body block. And somebody suggested you needed to get a body block, and I do not mount with a body block. And when I get done going through this, we'll flip to the other screen and I'll show you how I do it. But a clear body block, the advantages of this would be that if you notice, there's 3 holes at the top and 2 holes at the rear. The three holes in the front, one's for the guide flag, and the other 2 are for fronts if you have them. And of course, the 2 in the rear for your tires. So when you set your chassis on that block, there's 3 magnets. So if you have a steel chassis, that'll kind of suck the chassis to the block, and then the car won't move on the block if you move it around. So, and then it's got the indentations on the side so you can pin the body. And basically, when you use one of these blocks, you have to trim your body you just got to trim your body to the correct height and everything by measuring it, marking it, and then cutting it. And then you put it over the chassis. You hold the body to the chassis in the indentations, and then you can poke the body or pin the body. And if you want, you can turn it over and make sure that the body is centered on the chassis, not crooked. So that's kind of the advantages of that body block. Personally, like I said again, I can't mount that way. So we are going to go to the other screen. So when you are mounting bodies, and Shane, you can jump in here or whatever, but usually, like, I will take a body, of course, cut all the flash off the sides, because there's flash that sticks out. And like I'm doing a 4-inch stock car body for my example here. So usually I'll cut the front of the body off where it needs to be cut off. And see, here's the thing about trimming bodies too, is there's different rules for different classes for different types of bodies. So in some classes like LMP, maybe stock car, you have to leave like a little bit of a vertical lip on the front. Now, like I've cut this body with a knife edge. It's like it's the out of sight Dodge body, so I'm going to run it flush with the bottom of the diaplane. So there's no vertical. Some places, like I said, you have to have a vertical. So once I do cut that off, then I come around the back. And again, sometimes you can cut the whole back out of your body, or sometimes, like with stock cars, you have to have an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch rear bumper. So I will mark 4-inch class is usually 1/8 inch rear. So I'll mark my 1/8 inch, and then I cut the back of my body out. Okay, so for me, my body is now ready to mount on the chassis. So I have a body block that is 3 inches wide, and it's basically like a kitchen cabinet cutout. And so it's got a slot, no indentations or anything like that. But this is narrow enough, and I'll show you here in a second. Before I get to that, but if you notice, I have some tape across the front, and on the other side I have basically a popsicle stick is what it is. So those are to set my front body height. So because you don't want your body down on the block like this, because it's going to drag the track when you take it to the track. So you have to mount it up a little bit. So hopefully when you get the track, it don't drag. Okay, and I got a little information on that too. So you put your chassis on the block like so, and then like again. So basically, I set my front end like so. I get it down there on the popsicle stick or on the tape on the top there, and then if you have to run, say you have to run an inch and 5/8 is your max rear height. I get my calipers and I set them at 1 inch and 5/8 and lock it. Well, let me go to 1 inch and 5/8 because this will be better. All right, we're going to be close. So there's 1 inch and 5/8, and you can see that my body is higher than would be required. So now I got to go back here and pull this down like so. And then, I'm right there, but I need to go down a tick more. So I get this side right where I want it. Now I would take and I would poke this side of the body. Put my pins in. That's not going to move. So after that's locked down, then I come over and I do the other side. And this, like I said, the left side's locked, the right side floats. So I can move the front down, the back up or down, whatever, to get it to be level across the front, level across the back. Now, this is kind of a pain in the butt to be doing all this and checking it with your calipers and laying your calipers down and moving. And then at some point, like after you pin this side and before you pin this side and you get it where you want, then you got to like pick it up and make sure that the body is centered on the chassis. It's not crooked, like too far to the front or to the left or right. You know what I'm saying? So
you don't have any wedge in her.
Yeah, no wedge in her. There you go.
Or y'all.
Okay, so and then poke that side and then come back and trim the bottom. Mark the bottom with a Sharpie. And maybe get a straight edge out there and do something like this. Something like that. Just mark that in there. Then take your scissors and cut that off and do the other side. And reinforce it and everything and put it on the car and it should be good to go. So, I don't know, it's been a couple months ago. I'm sitting here and I'm mounting some bodies one day and I'm like, it was like a 4.5 inch car and I was always having problems. Like I'd get the body on the block, get the height right. And by the time I poked it, when I let go of everything, then my body was usually lower than what was required. And I'd be like, okay, I'll just run it. So then the next time it's like, now the body's too high. I have to repin it. And then it's still low. It's like I couldn't get them perfect. And I'm like, okay, how can I? So anyway, I didn't really think about it. And then a week or two later, I'm not even mounting bodies. And I'm like, I know how to mount these bodies perfect now in the back. So I got 2 bodies here. So instead of cutting the body out of the back first or second after you cut the front off, that's my steps. So I thought, well, you know what?
I mean, you got the same steps because I always do the front, then do the back, and then I do the sides.
I don't know why. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I always cut the back out. Well, then I got to hold it and fidget with it to get it to the right height. And then most times it's not exactly. So I'm like, oh, wait a minute, dummy. Take your body, and if it's say 1 inch and 5, whatever your measurement is, hold your measuring stick flush with the top of the spoiler or the back of the body. Then come down and measure to the inch and, like I'm just use inch and 5/8 because that's mostly what height I have to run stuff at. Mark it down there to inch and 5/8, and you can see I've got a little bit of a black line there because the body was longer. And I cut on the bottom side of the line, which I need to actually cut on the top side of the line to be perfect. Okay?
Right.
So I got my front cut out, and my sides are still there. So now when I put this on my chassis on the block, and you push the rear of the body down, guess what? It can't go any lower because there's no cutout.
Right.
So this is basically a rest. Now my body's at like that perfect inch and 5/8 height.
Right.
And then you go do your front. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then come over here and pin one side, and you pick it up. Yep, it's centered. Put it back down. Go over the other side. And guess what? You're not going to have crooked rear ends because, I mean, you'll have a crooked rear end if you don't cut that line, if you don't cut the bottom of that body straight. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, excuse me. So, yeah, if you have to have a run, and even if you don't have to run a rear body height measurement exactly, say, okay, I want to run my body 1.5 inches. Well, okay, measure it at 1.5 inches. Or, if you want to mount two bodies, one a little higher and one the other, measure down, maybe make the second body 1/8 inch taller, mark them, cut them, put them on your block, and they're not going to go up and down.
Right. The only way that inch and 5/8 number would work is if you're mounting the chassis on an unrecessed block, right?
Correct.
Because if you're mounting on a recessed block, you have to
Right.
probably go a little shorter than 1 inch and 5/8 to compensate for the tire
Well,
hanging down in the recess.
Right. And see, that was another tip I was going to, so like okay, if I have to run my car at 50 thousandths clearance,
Mm-hmm.
and my car takes a 730 tire to clear 50 thousandths, I will put a 750 tire on the car, mount the body, and then with 730 tires, yeah, I'm like 10 thousandths lower.
Mm-hmm.
But I know when I go to the track, if anything, I'm going to be under, not over.
Right.
Because some guys, excuse me, their tech tools vary, and some use calipers, some have some homemade thing they made or whatever. It's like tech checks when you check the width. Some are tighter, some are looser. So I always mount, like I said, about 20 thousandths taller tire on the car, excuse me, and mount the body at that height if it's a required number. Then after I poke it and trim it and everything, and then I will take the big tires off, put the little tires on, check it, and it's just a hair under every time. So, but like you said, if you use a recessed block, you can't really do it that way. So you could figure out the math, like,
I
okay.
want to say John Mattis told me one time, like, what number he uses.
Well, okay, so you got to if it's 50 thousandths clearance,
Mm-hmm.
you would cut the body, I think 100 thousandths shorter. No.
Yeah. You're thinking about wheel jigs.
Yeah, I know. I'll have to get back to you next week on that one because I'm gonna have to play. What I'm gonna do is
we could probably figure it out, but it involves a lot of numbers.
Well,
not really a lot of numbers. It's just.
Well, how you could do it at home right now is you could take your car, put it on your tech block with the tires on it. It's 1 5/8 inches. Take your tires off, put it back on the tech block, and see what your measurement is, and you'll know what adjustment you have to make or what number you have to subtract from the 1 in 625,000. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the way to do it because your car with tires on it, you're 1 5/8 inches. Without tires, it's going to be lower.
Right.
And to know what exactly that number is, I believe it's 100 thousandths, but no, it should only be 50 thousandths because you're only raising the car 50 thousandths.
Right.
But
maybe half of that could be 25 thousandths or something.
Yeah, because see, when the tire, yeah, I don't know. And that's because you're measuring setting up off the block, so it should be 50 thousandths.
Right.
Because it's not jig wheels where you got to minus double the
Right.
clearance you're
Yeah.
trying to get. So it should be 50 thousandths because that's what you're lowering the car from. You pull the tires
Right.
off, lower it down, 50 thousandths. Or
Yeah,
if you run with
you're checking the car in right at tech.
right, and then if you're running, if you're running 63 thousandths, with tires on the car, you're inching a 5/8 with tires on the car on the tech block. Okay, so then when you take the tires off, put on the tech block, you're going to be 63 thousandths lower. So you'd minus.
Yeah, you should be lower whatever the tire is at minimum tech.
Right. So you would minus that 63 thousandths
right.
from the inch and 625 thousandths.
If you're mounting it in a recess, then you just subtract what you're teching with.
Right. But yeah, I mean,
50 and you want a little plate, some guys take in a little taller, say
yeah,
55, and take 55 out of the inch and 5/8.
Right.
That's if you're using a recessed block.
If you're using a recessed block, correct. So, yep, leave the back in. Like I said, measure it from where you want it to be, and then trim it. Let that rest on the bottom of the block at the back, and you'll have, as long as you trim that line straight, you'll be straight when that body. Yeah, you'll be straight when that body's mounted. You won't have this.
Right.
You'll have this versus that. So.
Yeah, I mean, too, for the most part, a lot of the tech guys give you a little clearance, a little play,
Yeah, some do, some don't.
Right.
But yeah, it's better to be a hair under than a hair over, because I mean, you can be a hair over. It really doesn't make a big difference, but a tech guy will say, well, this is too tall. You got to go. So now you got to go repin your body.
Right.
Basically in that case, a quick, easy thing to do is just pull your back body pins out and lower the body and repoke, and then trim the bottom extra that's hanging down below the bat pans off, and you'll be good to go. But that kind of raises the front up a little bit too. So
yeah, and then depending on what body it is, now you got the body on the motor and it.
Right.
All that stuff.
Yep. And I mean, there's recessed blocks that will let you put your like the block I showed you has just a hole. Now there's some body mounting blocks, and these are kind of trick where they actually have a recess to, you put your car in there with the braid on it, and but that's too much. So my block with the tape. Okay, so I don't know what this. I'd have to measure this, which I can measure it.
Probably like a 16th.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's a 16th actually. And my popsicle stick side is, well, dummy, turn it on again. I turned it off after I measured the other one. My popsicle stick side is 73 thousandths. And thing is, if you're running on the same track every week, and let's say you make a block or you tape a block up like this, go with a 16th. And then when you go to the track and you run your bodies, if they're dragging the track, then when you go home, add a little more tape to the top of that to raise your body up a little higher in the front.
Because I think on mine, I have like two pieces, like it's either 10 or 15 thousandths leg stand that I stacked up on top of one another.
Right.
And like you said, some tracks, like, it's a little too high,
Right.
It's the same,
Yeah, I don't know.
No really perfect science as to get in the front.
That's what I was saying. There's
track varies.
Yeah, there's no like real science to it. It's just getting it right.
I mean, if it's your home track and you race there every week, then yeah, you can have a specific tech or a mounting block that if I mount the body on this block, everything's gonna be good.
Well, and you know what? I don't know if it was you and I that talked about this on the show in the past or not, but I know it was on one of the shows we talked. So like, I can't really do this with this, but kind of the general rule of thumb is when you have if you don't have a tape or stick on the front of that block, you want to get the front of the body, like this has a diaplane. So you want to get it it looks like when you're looking through the car, if the bottom of that diaplane is flush, or the bottom of your vertical, whatever, is flush with the bottom of the chassis ears,
right,
you should be good on not dragging the front of the body.
well,
Unless you go to a track that has a really deep recess.
right. You know, because normally I obviously mount more bodies that where I don't have a rear spoiler height.
Right.
So generally, I always, like if I'm not using a block or whatever, I always just take the front of the body and the edges of the body I make level with the side of the pans.
There you go.
And then with the tires on a flat block, I let the back of the body hang low. Therefore, it raises the front, and that usually gives me right amount.
Right. Now, do you use a recessed block, or you do a block like I got?
I could do both.
Okay.
Honestly, I've done it so long without the recess.
Right.
You know?
Well, see that
I normally just do it on a regular block.
Well, and see, that's the thing. When I started racing, we didn't have recessed blocks, and we didn't have indented blocks.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And it's hard. It's hard to. I can't mount a body like on. I got to hold the side of that body.
Yeah.
To that block when I'm pinning.
Well, I mean, we all have our like.
Right.
I remember one time I asked to use your mounting block before, and I was like, I can't do that. And you were like, there's no difference other than mine's narrower.
Right.
I'm like, I'm just used to mine. You know,
right.
I just wanted to see what you use. I can't do it. You know?
Yep. Right. Right.
And then you know, like I've watched Bobby. He uses a recessed block. You know, and then Bobby looks at me and watches me, and it's like. Bobby can mount a body in like 3 minutes, and he laughs because he says it takes me like 10.
Right.
I was like, I'm more tedious. I mean, it's like you said at one race, you know, if you didn't have that little bit of a body drag, your car would be silent, you know?
Right.
And stuff. So that's just, again, that's my OCD, I guess, where everything has to be perfect, you know?
Yep. Okay, so that's our body tips for this episode. I'm not saying we'll have more next time.
We almost do a whole show on that because we never really covered. Do we push the body forward or do we push the body back?
Right.
Tune in next time.
I know. Yeah, that's a whole nother subject.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's just some general body tips, mounting tips, I guess I should say. And another tip, I guess, when mounting the body, you don't want to really paint the sides of your body real heavy. You want to kind of just fog them. So when you are holding that, you can kind of see the pins, the holes for where the pins or the body clips are going to go. Yep. If you get them too dark, sometimes you can put a light behind. You can kind of move around and you can see the light come through the holes and you can poke them perfect. And yeah, so that's all I kind of got for this moment on bodies. So today, I don't know why today. Well, there was two issues going on. Like one issue was posted on a couple of slot car pages on Facebook. You know, don't buy Chinese slot car parts. Spend your money on American-made stuff. And then it was Chinese-made motors versus American-made motors. And you know, a lot of differing views. I wouldn't say arguments, but differing views. So,
opinions.
I guess I'm going to say, well, here's the deal with Chinese motors. They're very popular. Lots of places, classes, raceways, organizations use the Chinese-made motors. Chinese-made motors are inexpensive motors, and they're like FK motors, which is this type of motor. With internal brushes. There's no brushes on the outside. They're inside, tamper-proof motor. I mean, anywhere from $10 to $16 on average for a motor like that. Then you have, and I don't have one in front of me, is like the ProSlot FK motor, which has external brushes. It has a seal around it because the end bell is put onto the can and screwed on. And those are like $20 motors, again, made in China. You can change brushes and springs. You can, I don't want to say tweak those motors, but I mean, you can at least, you know, adjust your brush hoods, make sure they're straight. You could solder the oil light to the can. But other than that, other than changing brushes and springs, that's really all kind of the tuning you can do on them. So there's pluses and minuses of both types of motors, but both are made in China. So people say, okay, well, let's run American-made motors. Well, first of all, there's no motor made in slot car racing that is 100% made in America. Like, there's materials or parts or pieces that come from other countries, not just China, but some come from other countries. So there is no such thing as a 100% American-made slot car motor. Because, yes, you can make the end bell, the hardware, the can, so you can buy the screws, and they're made in America. You can, make the hardware in America. You can get the bushings made in America. But all the magnets come from Asia, whether it be Japan, China, whether it be cobalt, whether it be neodymium, polyneos, or ceramic. Like, Asia is the world of magnets. And yes, you can buy blocks of material for cobalt and you can EDM cut them, but the blocks usually come from a Chinese magnet manufacturer. And the rare earth materials that are used come from China, and because they have like the world's largest resource of rare earth materials in the ground there. So the difference is, if you go to an American-made motor, which this is an older American-made motor, but I just had it laying here. This is an older Mira motor. And even the Mira motors were not 100% made in America back in the day. So, I mean, I would say probably 90% of it was, but 10% of it wasn't. So, but when you start getting into motors with American armatures, and I don't care what class you started, the cheapest motor you can buy with an American arm is probably around $50 from Pro Slot, and that would be like a puppy dog or a big dog. Coford has the JK Hawk 6 motor with like a Group 19 arm or something in it. They make for drag racing, but you can road race them. And those, I think, are in that $50 range. I don't think they're less than $50. But the setup, again, is made in China. So while these motors cost $12, the armatures for these motors start at about $30, $35 and go up depending on the class and what motor it fits. So, yes, you can, there's nothing wrong with a Chinese setup as far as quality and stuff. I mean, it's pretty good stuff, actually.
Right.
But to really make it American, the big difference between the motors is where the armature is made and the quality that's put into the armatures. So when you buy a $2 part in China, it's not going to compare to a part that probably costs $20, $25 to produce here.
Right.
So there's a huge difference in price, but there's a huge difference in quality and reliability too.
Right.
So for you guys out there saying, well, let's not race Chinese motors, that's fine and dandy, but you got to convince all your friends at the Raceway to start spending a lot more money on motors to run the way you want to run or a couple of your buddies want to run. And not everybody wants to do that. So I'm not pro-Chinese, I'm not anti-Chinese, but it's something that was allowed in 30 years ago. It was like when we first seen the FK motors. Well, that's the FK. But then again, we had made in Chinese, or made in Hong Kong, which is now China, 16D motors from the 70s. You know what I'm saying? And in the 60s, we had the majority of the motors, Mabuchi, were made all in Japan. And, as much as some people dislike China right now, back in the 60s, people didn't like Japan. I mean, it was, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
there's always someone who don't like someone. That's just,
right,
that's just
right.
It is.
So, we used to, I remember being a kid, and this is no kidding. I mean, a kid in the 70s, if something said made in Japan, that was like that's junk.
Right.
Versus made in the USA. Well, then China comes along, and that started making Japan look good. You know what I mean? Like the difference in the quality, and some things. Not everything's bad from China. Not everything's bad from Japan, but that's just the moniker it gets. And I think a lot of it's just is sentiment that, you know, if it's not made in America, it's no good. You know, because we're pretty proud people, and but you know, again, if you
also got to look at people in China, probably think stuff made in USA is junk.
Well, that's probably true too. But
you know,
well, again, if you want American-made stuff, you're going to pay top dollar for it. But you're going to get good quality stuff.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But not many people want to pay top dollar for stuff. So, I mean, it's like, you know, we had 16D motors for many years, and then like the first FK motors came, which really the first FK motors, they weren't Chinese. They were made by Mabuchi in Japan because they were some old obsolete stock that Mr. Ono in Japan found, and he bought a boatload of them. And then in the late 90s, he sold, you know, all the motors sold out, and he went back to Mabuchi, and Mabuchi wanted lots of money to make more of those motors because it was not a production motor for them. Well, in the meantime, when there was no motors to be had, no play-fit motors to be had that were made by Mabuchi in Japan, other companies started looking at China to make the same thing in China. So we got motors in from China that were to be replacements for the play-fits. And then the play-fits came back, but they were different. They weren't as good as the original ones. But you know, the thing was, a lot of people said, well, those FK motors are faster than 16D motors. You know, Chinese made 16D motors, or Hong Kong made 16D motors. They weren't faster, okay? Like in a straight line, the 16Ds were way faster. But because the FK motors were smaller and lighter, they made the car handle better. So they would run similar lap times. Same, maybe one might be a little faster, one, you know, but as far as they weren't faster in a straight line, they were just faster lap time wise. So as more manufacturers started putting them in ready to run cars and more places sold those ready to run cars, the more popular the FK motors became. And they never really took out the 16D motor out of the industry because they still make and sell 16D motors, and they're still popular. And but the little cheap FK motors, whether it be $12 and you can't get to the brushes, or $20 and you get to the brushes, those are the two popular motors in slot racing. Because, you know, people don't want to build motors. People don't know how to build motors because there's no need to build motors, because if you're not racing with built motors, there's no reason to learn how to build them.
Right.
So, and then if you start building motors, you know, you got to have the tools and equipment necessary to build them right. And that's another issue we can probably talk next week, the economics of sealed throwaway motors versus built, serviceable, rebuildable motors, because I have to do some math on that. Because in my opinion, based on my experience, like when we ran and retro racing the puppy dogs, which could be rebuilt, you know, you were buying a $42 motor versus a $12 motor, but your $42 motor could be rebuilt for $15.
Right.
And people will say, well, okay, so that's the price of a new motor. So basically, if you bought a motor for $42, you could buy 3 of the throwaway motors. But if the throwaway motors only lasted one race, you know, one and done, versus your puppy dog motor, which could run 8, 10, 12. I mean, I ran one motor 22 races.
Right.
before I rebuilt it. So that was $42 versus 22 times 12, $240. If you're doing, if they were one and dones. And when I say one and dones, I mean,
we were talking earlier, I still got motors from 2017. I built brand new for the Nats. I still race.
Right. That's part of that's because you don't race them often too. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right. Yeah. Because most of my racing now is all sealed stuff.
Right. So again, which is cheaper in the long run? But there's different ways of looking at all that too. So maybe we'll talk about that next week. But we'll talk about that here in the future. So, because that's a good discussion in my opinion. So I'm making notes to talk about that next weekend. So, or not next weekend, next week. What am I saying? Versus throwaway.
We can always do the show Sunday. Give it to them early. Hey, we got anything else to do?
Yeah, I hear you. So, again, when it comes to slot car racing, there's no way you can avoid 100% American-made motors, cars, parts.
Right.
So, I mean, some companies have braid made in China. Some have their chassis made in China. Some buy axles from China. The lead wire can be made in China. Body clips can be made in China. Guide flags can be made in China. I don't know of any that are. I'm just saying.
Right, you're just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah, they could be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know all the ins and outs of every.
I mean, almost all the motor brushes that go in any motor, whether they're sealed motors or whatnot, aren't those all made in China?
China or Japan. Good.
So I mean, that's still not American, you know what I mean?
Right. Good brushes come from Japan. Crap brushes come from China.
Gotcha.
Plain and simple. And there's not an American motor brush company that can duplicate the Gold Dust or Bigfoot brushes. So there you have it. And there's reasons for that, but I'm not going to go into that right now.
Right.
So.
I think we've talked about it before. I think I remember you telling me something about what
there's chemicals and materials that are used there that can't be used here. That to sum it up. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say as soon as I thought about that for a minute, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that conversation we had.
Right. Because there used to be a company that made brushes, and that's what Mura and ProSlot. I don't know about. Yeah, probably Cofer did at one time. They just made a production brush that they put in the production motors. So like for example, back when we used to run, when box stock 15 first started, you had to run Mura motors and you weren't allowed to take them apart and work on them. So the first thing you did was you take the motor out of the package and you take the brushes and springs off and you throw the brushes away and put Bigfoot brushes in them because you were allowed to do that. But the Bigfoot brushes made the motors run so much better than that stock brush that was made here.
Production stuff that they had.
Right. I mean, they were good. They were okay brushes for what they were for, but they weren't a performance brush.
Right.
But you could go to a raceway somewhere and no one knew about the other brushes, and all them guys were running those stock brushes in their motors because they didn't know about other brushes or didn't know that those $3.50 brushes make your motors run better. Why would I put $3.50 brushes in my motors when my motors run fine with the brushes that came in it?
Right.
Well, it's because you haven't spent the $3.50 to find out the difference, and it was a huge difference. So, a little more history. All right. That's all I really have for tonight. Did you want to add anything?
No, not really. Normally I just kind of go off your lead and conversate about stuff. I don't think there's ever really been anything where it's like, ooh,
Right. No, you're a good wingman. You jump in there when you need to, and you add your 2 cents, and you ask questions. And
sometimes they're good questions. Sometimes they're out in left field.
Yep. And I still have another question or two to answer from a couple weeks ago, and then maybe I'll get to that next week. because that takes some digging too. But anyway, if you have any questions, or you want to share something or announce something or have us announce something, you can always send us a message on Facebook or over on the YouTube channel, and we will try to address those as quickly and as complete as we can. And
I think we get more. Hey, you didn't have a word of the show.
We got the. I already have the word, so that should be a no-brainer. Anybody's been following the show the last 3 weeks, but this week's secret word or word of the show will be Jim, in recognition of Jim Hahn, and we will miss him. And that's all I got. So if everybody needs to stay safe and wash your hands, and I guess keep your face mask on and your rubber gloves on when you're out and about, and stay 6 feet away from everybody. The sooner we get over this, the sooner we can all get back to racing. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying.
Right.
The people I want to blame are the ones that don't watch the show.
I was at, it was totally different because it's like, yeah, right. You know, any other time I would shake your hand, but right now we kind of don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, we ain't fist bumping right now, so.
No, it's just like, all right, well, we'll kind of just wave, you know.
Right. So, all right. So until next week, be safe, be careful, keep on working on your slot cars, buy slot car parts the tracks need to support right now.
Share pictures. There's enough websites and stuff out there on Facebook or post. I mean, let's see what you're working on.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on Facebook for sure.
Yeah.
So, again, until next week, it'll be episode number 139 next week. Be safe, have fun, and secret word is Jim. Until next week, adios.
See you later.